Hello everybody, how's everybody doing? So far so good? I feel free now without my hand microphone. Many of you saw me struggle on Friday to speak into the microphone, so let's try to tackle it this way. I'm honored to be here, and I am an outsider actually entirely. If you weren't an HR representative at all, I actually don't work in the sphere of diversity and inclusion intentionally. I actually work outside of that in strategic innovation and design-led innovation. And I want to talk to you guys today about the way I see diversity and inclusion from the outside and the value of this third horizon that I want to call out. Fontaine spoke to it, Brian spoke to it, but really the business context and the uncertainty that our companies face today is unprecedented. We are dealing with the most competitive market space we've ever seen before. Not only customer loyalty, but employee loyalty is fierce. I mean, 7 months of retention is considered loyalty before people turn over. There's people opting out, jumping to the next best deal. It's really hard to keep people either as customers or employees. We've got regulation and expectation changing the sphere of what it is we think is possible and really shortening the limits of what we can actually plan for if we don't know what's happening next and what we need to adjust to. We've also got uncertainty. We've got presidential elections, we've got new regulations in terms of environments, and we've got, we were just speaking of it now, we've got disasters, and we've got no clarity on our supply chain. All of this is leading to mass uncertainty. And what it means is nothing works like it used to, because it doesn't. We used to live in a world of reductionism. If I can just isolate the problem down to its little node, its little kernel, maybe then I can understand it. Maybe then I can know it. Maybe then it can be predictable if I have enough information. Well, in reality, that's creating frustration because it doesn't work like that anymore. In order to survive so much uncertainty and so much instability, we need a new approach. We need a new way of problem solving that steps forward into that uncertainty, into that complexity, willingly. And that's where I see the true value of diversity and inclusion. I hit the wrong button. Oops. That's where I see the value of diversity and inclusion most, is actually in setting the agenda in this new space as a catalyst for doing things differently. So if we step back into the horizons that have already been spoken about, the first horizon is kind of this conversation around demographic diversity and can we level the playing field. And in this horizon and in this space, we're really talking about the business value of destandardization. What that means is in a post-industrial world, which we currently are living in, everything has been driven to mechanize our business, mechanize the way we plan, the way we predict, the way we set budgets, even down to the business plan. It's a standard approach. It's an important thing, but it's a standard thing. When we start to accommodate for diversity and inclusion, we actually start to de-standardize. We can't set the same expectations. We can't expect people to work as machines. We need to start accommodating them differently. Once we get to that perspective, we move on to the second horizon where we're focused on the diversity of thinking as a creative problem-solving mechanism. And this is absolutely true. We see that the more different thinking hats worn, the more diversity in the room, the better we are at solving problems. And the reason is, and Ryan showed us all of those figures, the actual true value in that is not something we talk about so freely, but it's friction and discomfort. And if we own that space, we realize that when we have somebody that thinks different than us, my ego can't drive the conversation anymore. You're not going to just agree with me because you agree with me. I'm actually going to have to step outside myself. I'm going to have to seek other opinions. I'm going to have to negotiate another opinion. I'm going to have to explore something with somebody else. And that friction and discomfort makes me honest. Keeps me honest and sets me with an integrity towards solving that problem that doesn't just come from my own bias and my perspective, but leans on everybody else's. True innovation, from my perspective, lies actually on this third horizon. And this is the horizon that is yet still forming. But it's diversity of perspective. So it's not just diversity of thinking, but it's actually where we sit and how we look at a problem. Because everything we've talked about so far is from within the organization. And everybody's solving problems from within our community. But when we talk a diversity perspective, and I'm willing to change the language here if we want, but I'm talking about stepping outside the organization and looking in, and starting to include those voices from the outside in to actually start shaping innovation and driving innovation for us. And the real business value in this is actually shifting from an egocentric mindset to an eco-centric mindset. This means that it's not actually within our four walls that innovation emerges as an organization, despite the wealth of creativity and opportunity there, but it's actually an ability to include the outside voice and their perspective, what they think it is we're doing. Because if innovation is delivering value and remaining relevant, it's their voice that actually is going to matter and shape that perspective. So when we put all of these things together, we built this model together, Diane and myself, looking at diversity or driving business value through diversity and inclusion. And starting looking at that step change that we're creating when we move from demographic diversity into diversity of thinking and start to capitalize on creativity, and then actually how we move into that diversity of perspective to get the biggest step change, the biggest gain in innovation when we start thinking from that eco-centric lens. So what does that take? Well, it definitely takes something of us, but how do we do it? Move from ego to eco-centric. Design thinking is a potential vector for this. It happens to be my practice. But I want to share with you today a little bit of the practices that we use in design thinking to help galvanize and shift these transformational opportunities for organizations. At its broadest strokes, design thinking is simply a set of mindsets, skill sets, and tools that help us navigate ambiguity. It helps us move into this uncertainty. It helps us move into discomfort with some sort of confidence and agreement for a way we work and the mindset that we approach each of these with. The first practice that's absolutely core to design thinking is actually embracing complexity. We don't live in a reductionist state when we use design thinking. A simple problem, like a math problem, we can probably do ourselves. A complicated problem, we definitely need an expert to help solve, but there's going to be a right or wrong answer in that space. When we move into the complex problem space, the one with mass amounts of uncertainty, we're talking about no right or wrong answer anymore. We're talking about better or worse. And that's a constant negotiation with those we are in service of, not ourselves. And that's how we start to move into complexity with some sort of confidence. We also look to the edge for insight. In design thinking, we do not design for the masses at the beginning, because the masses, the ones well within the bell curve, the one where the market segment is, the one that will take up most of the market share, that's validation. The ones on the edge are the ones with the opinion, the ones that are typically excluded, the ones that have either solved this for themselves or are desperate for a solution. They're the ones that have a voice that can actually give us the insight about what it is we're actually doing and how it is we can best enable them. That's where we get insight. We only validate once we move into the meat of the bell curve and think about our market share and the business case. The next practice of design thinking is keeping the customer needs at the core. The lens of desirability, viability, and feasibility are fundamental. But typically, organizations are going to enter into the viability or the feasibility lens to understand whether or not something is worth exploring. But in the face of so much uncertainty today, we actually need to deliver value. And we don't define value within our four walls. The outside world defines value. So for us to remain relevant, for us to remain valuable to society and to the customers that we serve, we need to enter through their lens first. Only later do we put in the lens of viability and feasibility to make sure that whatever we do is something that we're within our capacity, we have the technology and the market for. But this ensures that anything we put to market will solve a need and will create value for our customers. And last, we de-risk decisions by testing them early and often. We joked on Friday, it's $100. That is the best test you could ever spend. It's an afternoon with a customer. It's the best money that you could ever spend in de-risking your ideas because it embodies eco-centric mindset, not an egocentric mindset. If I'm willing to put my idea in front of a customer and have it ripped and shred to pieces, I'm saving the company money. Quite often people ask me in my design practice, well, what's the ROI of design? And I'll tell you 10 failed projects. And they're like, what? Failure isn't embodied yet as a de-risking mechanism, but it should be. By failing, by not sending something to market early, I've saved us money. We've saved us money. We've thought differently, we've learned, we've changed. Our ability to strategically pivot is going to be critical for us to survive this uncertain and unknowing marketplace. So that ability to understand something, build, test, refine it to understand more is absolutely critical. So kind of in closing here, I want to echo on the practice. Design thinking is something that, of course, I do as a profession, but it actually doesn't need to be called design thinking. As long as we're embedding empathy in absolutely everything we do. So that means understanding who we're in service of and who it is we're building with and the environment we're building in. Doesn't matter what it's called as long as it's de-risking our decisions and building our confidence along the way. As long as it's building deliberate value at every step and hacking the mindset as we go so that we remain accountable not to ourselves, but actually to the outside market and solving real problems in society. This shift is not something that we can externalize either. This is not something that we put on other people or do differently. This is something that I think everybody here would acknowledge that we actually need to embody within ourselves. Because what we're talking about here is not anything other than shifting from an instance thinking in a fear-paced communities and cultures where we're uncertain, we're worried, to lifting up and thinking systemically, designing systemically, considering the impact it's going to create. And this is subtle, but probably the scariest thing you'll ever do, is put positive thinking actually before design thinking. Because in doing all of this and shifting from an egocentric mindset to an eco-centric mindset, you're setting yourself up for vulnerability. And at every step of that way, it is going to be a vulnerable path. But if we can embody positive thinking before design thinking, we're actually going to see the optimism. And we're going to be able to see the opportunity to create new synergies, to hack unique mindsets, and to find new ways to deliver value to our customers and out to the market. So thank you.